Hello everybody, right, listen, I'm going to talk you through this learning intention. Okay, we're looking at learning to explain the effects of presentation or language features from a text and just doing it better, doing it with greater precision, so doing it more exactly. I'll tell you why in a minute, but particularly if you're doing the 10-mark challenge at Charwell, then you're going to need to improve on these two skill areas, explaining the effects, okay? It's for these sorts of questions. For the foundation paper, things like how does the web page use language to inform and to persuade? That was one from the January exam of 2012, the question 3. Same skill, really, explaining effects. For question 4, comparing the way text use presentational features. Okay, and as you can see, as I've noted down here, nationally we're pretty terrible at this. The average score for this, I was told, is 4 out of 12, average across the nation. So it means if you can get the hang of it, then and you can improve your mark, you really make yourself stand out. There's lots of marks to be gained here, and I know when we looked at your mocks and we looked at your January results, if you did it at our school, this was a huge issue. These two questions. For higher, it's the same skill, so this video will be relevant for higher as well. Things like in question 4, compare the different ways in which language is used for effect. So it's explaining what that effect is. Even more marks available there, and it's definitely a weaker area in the higher tier. I'm going to concentrate on text from foundation, but as I say, if you're doing higher, watch this anyway, it might be useful. I'll try not to go on and on too much, right? Right, so we'll use January 2012 as an example. You had your text from the Mail Online. You had your text from Sport Relief, web page trying to persuade schools to get involved. Right, this is how, when we looked at your papers, this is what was going wrong. We were throwing marks away in two ways. Right, so if you really wanted to muck this up, do one or both of these two things. First of all, a good way lots of you were getting low marks on this was to not answer the question. Right, was to not basically write about presentation, was to not look at the key words in the question, just kind of ramble on a bit randomly, really. Secondly, it was people were mentioning quotation but not explaining the effects in any sort of detail. This is why we thought we'd made this video, because it hits that need. Right, I'll give you an example first of all. Sample 1. What I'd like you to do now is pause the film, mark it out of 12. So what do you think this gets out of 12? What's your sort of impression? What are the strengths and what are the weaknesses? So pause the video and do that now. Right, okay, well this is your classic case of a student not answering the question. Okay, remember the question is this one here, compare the way both texts use presentational features for effect. There's some good stuff in here. There's actually one of the strengths, I suppose, is that it's quite comparative all the way through. They're very different. Source 1 is doing this, whereas source 3 is doing something else. There's some good stuff, but if you look at it, try and find the number of presentational features that are mentioned. Remember, compare the ways text use presentational features. It's not just compare the texts, what's similarity and different. Look, in the foundation, they'll even tell you, write about the way they're presented, explain the effect of presentation, and compare the way they look. Now, this student hasn't really done that. They mention format here, but don't really say anything about format. It's clear source 1 has come from an interview, which gives us more facts and opinions. Well, of course, facts and opinions is more sort of content or language, really. It's not about presentation. Source 1 is presented as an informative piece of writing, whereas source 3 is trying to persuade and promote sports relief. Again, that's telling us about the text's purpose. It's true, informative and persuasive, but it's not saying anything about presentation. Rachel Latham's article is set out as a more newspaper article, whereas source 3 is an advertisement on the internet. Well, we know that already. That's not telling us anything new. It's not until we get to here. Source 3 is portrayed as a funny piece of writing, as the picture of a young kid in a spacesuit. Right, that is the first time that the student mentions a presentational technique. Right, and that's a big problem because you've wasted all this time. You've not got any marks so far. And it shows the humour and the imagination of the writer's mind. Now, that's not bad. It talks about the effect as well. But the problem is there just isn't enough of that sort of stuff. Okay, source 1 is a more serious article focused on the topic. You get a sense of realism compared to source 3. Fine, but it doesn't tell us anything about presentation, so therefore it doesn't get us any marks. Okay, so this was quite low. I think this got 4 out of 12, but I mean that's pretty generous, really. I can't see how they're getting many more marks there, but that's what the marker gave it anyway. So there we go. Right, what about this one then? Second sample. Same thing again. Read it, mark it out of 12, strengths and weaknesses. Do that now. Okay, so this is your classic second problem. If the first one wasn't answering the question, the second one is answering the question. Look, you can see uses what have I just done? Presentational features in different ways, but it doesn't explain effects in detail. This student does really well to find so many presentational devices. Look, it talks about there's a solid blue background, there's bold writing, there's an italic font, there's 3 main colours. They're again talking about background, but going on to talk about icons and headlines, bullet points, picture, icons again. So all the way through, it's writing about presentation. So it is answering the question, which is quite good in a way, but it actually gets the same mark. It also gets 4 out of 12. Not very many. Why is that? Well, actually, if you take it apart, that answer, and just look at what the effects were, I've taken all the sort of the sentences out and just got the technique and the effect. We've got a solid blue background, link it to what the writing is about. Bold writing, make it stand out and look important. Italic font, draw your attention to it so you'll read it. Now, all of this, you could argue, may be true, but it's not going into enough detail and it's not being specific about this text. Why exactly? Like, you could say that about any bold writing, is to make it stand out and look important. Okay, why are they making this particular bit of writing on this particular text important? Okay, so I suppose if we actually nip back to the sport relief thing, so you could say this bold writing here stands out and therefore persuades us that we need to get involved. I mean, that wouldn't be taking it terribly much further, but it'd be better. Rise to the challenge. Okay, so you could argue that is colourful and stands out, but you could also say it uses a kind of slightly childish font, maybe to appeal to a teenage audience or to a younger audience to get involved with this thing because it's their target audience, to get involved with sport relief. Okay, so you can see different ways that we can go wrong here. Either not answering the question at all, which is a total disaster, or trying to answer it but not going into enough detail. Red, white and blue, which could stand for the United Kingdom, yes, okay, but why would that be useful? Why would that be the case? Why would they want to appeal to this sense of the United Kingdom? It makes them more noticeable and interesting. See, a lot of this is really just saying it stands out. And to get the C or above, you can't just say it stands out. Again, to draw your attention down here, yeah? It adds a good effect. Not precise enough, not saying exactly why the techniques have been used. Okay, so how do we do it then? Tips for getting this right. 2 things, I suppose. First of all, learn some phrases, some impressive words and phrases that you're going to use in your answer. Have a couple that you keep in mind that if you get, they're quite unusual maybe. I'll show you some in a second that you're going to use if you get a chance. And secondly, okay, we're going to link explanations to the text's purpose. Right, rather than just saying it draws your attention, we're going to link the explanation to explain how that supports the persuasive or informative purpose of the text. Right, to have a look at one first of all, I mean, this is something you may have been given by a teacher already, but it's just useful phrases that you might use to link to your explanation. It grabs the reader's attention, it's memorable, it has sudden impact, it directly involves the reader. This is a great one. It lodges the idea in the reader's mind. You know, just try and get that into your head. It lodges the idea in the reader's mind. Get that phrase into your head. And obviously then you need to go on and say what the idea is, or lodges the idea in the reader's mind that they should really take part in this because it's going to be fun, something like that. It's humorous. I mean, it's okay to say it draws the eye, but then you've got to say why it's drawn the eye to that particular bit. What action does it want you to take if it's a persuasive text? Anyway, loads of them here. Learn these. Find a way to learn them. I don't know, revision cards stuck up around your room. Look on the revision and learning strategies playlist. You could use the room strategy to do that, which is on the revision and learning playlist. Don't think just looking at this now is going to work, but maybe choose 4 or 5 of them and get them into your heads and practice using them. Obviously, you'll get a chance to do that in a minute. Right, so let's have a look at a more successful answer now. Now I've moved to a question 3 about how does the web page use language. So we've gone off presentation now, and I've kind of done that just to show you that it's the same skill whether you're writing about language or presentation. So everything that we've just learnt about and these 2 top tips, they apply to this question just as much as they do to the one about presentation. Okay, here's a model which achieves a better mark. What mark would you give it? Why is it better? So pause now and then we'll have a look at that and have a talk about it in a second. Okay, hope you've done that now. Interesting this is because this got a 10. It's got 10 out of 12, so a really good mark. Interesting that it's by no means perfect. And there's lots of things that kind of stick out. Look, like straight away the student misspelt the word language, which isn't a great start. Should be UA. Things like, look, the sentence structure isn't great. The third use of persuasive language is personal pronouns. The evidence is you'll raise a lot of cash. This suggests to the reader it's up to them and make them feel important and guilty about the children if they don't. That is the whole PEE, which really I think is much better if it's separate sentences. In one sentence, goes on too long. But of course it doesn't matter in this case because you're not being assessed on your sentence structure. You're not getting marks for varying accurate sentences. You're just getting marks for point, evidence, explain, really, and how well you can do your explanations. So in that sense, it does very well. It's just really clear and goes into very organised, isn't it? Look, they've just learned, this student just learned to use PEE really well. So it starts with a point, command sentences, gives the evidence is be a sport and dress up, and then so that's your quotation, absolutely essential, you get your quotation in for the language question. And then look at this is the interesting bit. This makes the reader feel like they're being ordered to do something, that there's no other choice. I mean, that's not brilliant, is it, in terms of linking to the text purpose? But nevertheless, it goes further than just saying, oh, this makes it stand out to the reader, or whatever, or this short sentence makes the reader interested. I mean, if I do the same thing as I did with the less successful model, interestingly, they've written about fewer features, although the last one was presentation, this is language. Command sentences we've talked about. They then go on to talk about rhetorical questions, creates the effect where the reader feels obliged to participate in the sport relief event. That's quite a nice phrase, isn't it? And one that you can use. If you're obliged to do something, you feel obliged, you kind of feel like you have to do it. Okay, so here's an example of a student just getting that bit of vocabulary in their head and using it to really good effect there. Personal pronouns suggests to the reader, this person, I don't know if it's a boy or a girl, but they know their linking phrases and they know their PEE. It's up to them and makes them feel important and guilty about the children if they don't. See how it kind of extends on a bit there. Exaggeration suggests that everyone is depending on the reader and they'll feel obligated to help. Again, the same thing as obliged, to feel obligated or to feel obliged to do something. And then they go on to talk, actually here in this bit, the writer also uses language to inform, because remember the question is about inform and persuade. So if you just write about inform, you're not going to get the higher marks. I suspect why they've taken marks off this candidate is they've only written this one little thing at the end about statistics. They've said the evidence is £25 could provide 10 street, blah, 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 quite a long quotation there, a bit too long. Again, that would be better if it was a full stop, but they get away with it. This makes it easier for the reader to know how much they're helping, so it will make them feel good about themselves. So it's these sort of phrases and just going a little bit further. Compare it to the one that got 4. Link to what the writing's about. Make it stand out and look important. Look at the quality of the explanation of effects there compared to the quality of the explanation of effects there. It's not massively different, is it? It's just this one is talking exactly, is thought about what the text is trying to achieve. So this idea about linking to the text purpose, they've thought, right, this is trying to get us to get involved in this sport relief thing, and their explanations make reference to that. Their explanations talk about that. It makes them feel important and guilty about the children if they don't. That's the children that they're raising money for. It suggests everyone is depending on the reader and they'll feel obligated to help. Do you see what I mean? So it's saying they're obligated to help, obviously help with the fundraising and things like that. Okay, it could be clearer. You could write this essay, this answer much better, but they've done enough to just encourage the examiner to just give them the marks. Okay, so this goes to show, doesn't it, that to get high marks is really doable. You can all do it. You've just got to make sure you don't make these two classic mistakes of either not answering the question or not explaining the effects in detail, and you've got to learn to do this, learn some impressive phrases, and I think this is the biggie. Link your explanation to whatever the text is trying to achieve. Okay, right, that's all very well though, listening to that. I mean, I was just going to say, if you compare that to that, you'll see which is better and hopefully get a sense of why it's better. Interestingly, this one writes about fewer techniques, but does it in more detail and gets a higher mark. So you don't have to write for a 12-mark question. If you write about 3 or 4 techniques, that's plenty, as long as you go into a little bit of detail. Right, that's all very well listening to this, and well done if you've made it this far, but you've got to practice, haven't you? To make any real difference to your achievement, to get better at something, you have to have a go. So what I've got for you is 2 texts. One is, they're both websites just because it was easier for me to grab them off the web, to be honest. This is the BBC's Newsbeat site from Radio 1. It's a news report about animal cruelty and a report from the RSPCA. Okay, and this one, so I guess what's the purpose of this text? I'd say pretty much more than anything it's an informed text, isn't it? It's the news. It's not trying to persuade us of anything in particular. It's just trying to inform us in a kind of interesting way. Whereas this one is the RSPCA, Royal Society for the Protection of Animals. What's the C then? Royal Society, the Protection, oh, got you. Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Sorry, got that wrong initially. These guys, this is a persuasive text, isn't it? They want you to get involved. They want you to give them their money. They want you, like it says here, to sign up to their newsletter and all that sort of stuff. So what you need to do then, you can do the presentation question, right, which is, where is it? There. Look again at these 2 sources. Compare the ways they use presentational features for effect. Okay, you can use the same bullet points, I guess. What effect are they trying to achieve? How do they use presentation to do that? Okay, so write about that text, obviously pause it to have a look at it, and this text. Write for about, what is it, 16, 18 minutes, okay, and then compare your answer to this one, I suppose. Is it similar? Have you done these things? Used some impressive phrases? Have you linked to the text purpose? Okay, do that now. What I might do is just make a little follow-up film to this where I look in a bit more detail about what you might write. Don't watch it. You do it first, but I'll try and make another film to just explain what sort of things you might have written about and maybe look at a bit of a sample writing if I can get it together to do that. Alright, I hope that was helpful. Get in touch if you've got any questions about that, and best of luck with it.